Hello and welcome to Blooming Curious, the podcast dedicated to reimagining early childhood education through the power of curiosity. We explore the strategies that inspire a lifelong love for learning in children. So if you're an educator or a curious parent looking for creative, meaningful ways to engage children and move beyond the talk and chalk traditional classroom approach, then this is the podcast for you. I know that you're enjoying yourself, you're on holiday, you're enjoying the sunshine, or you're enjoying, log fires and glasses of red wine. But there comes a point in January when we as teachers have this little annoying voice in our head and we start to think about going back to school. What we're going to do, how we're going to set up. You already perhaps have been on Amazon, you've been to Kmart, you've been to Target, you've been wherever, and you're already starting to buy. Well, this episode is here to tell you to take a chill pill and stop buying, and don't buy anything for your classroom or anything. Don't spend any money on your classroom until you've listened to this episode. And I'm going to direct you in this episode to some of the previous episodes, which were actually at the beginning of 2024, to give you a start on how you set up a classroom and everything that goes into getting organized for the back to school year. So I want to just start by saying in episode 41, I spoke about something that is more important than your classroom decor. And your most important thing when we're going back to school is to think about how on earth you are going to engage those kids. What are you going to do to keep them curious and questioning? Because there's nothing more infuriating for a teacher than a kid who sits at a desk and you see those eyes and there's nothing there. There's nothing behind them. There's no light. For me as a teacher, that was always my biggest fear, is I don't want to see kids like that. I don't want to see kids that are not switched on. I want to see kids that are eager and ready to learn. And so I think our biggest challenge is not what colors we're doing in our classroom, but what are our strategies that we are going to use to keep the kids in our class engaged, interested in what we are teaching them. So I think we need to make curiosity a priority when we're planning our lessons and when we're planning the way we set up our classrooms. We should not be thinking, what pretty colors can I put in? But rather, what can I put into my classroom that's going to get these kids interested in learning? So that was episode 41, how to make curiosity a priority for back to school. And I'll leave a link to that in the show notes. Episode 40, the one just before that, was actually what started getting my goat, was when I was seeing all these teachers on Instagram putting up these amazingly decorated classrooms, spending a fortune. And I was just asking myself, why? We do not need to spend a fortune on decorating our classrooms. We are not on The Block. And The Block is an Australian program where people are all competing to see who's got the most beautifully decorated and designed house. We are not doing that. Our aim is to see if we can get kids to learn, not who's got the smartest and who's got the nicest and prettiest classroom. And so I really think that instead of spending your money on Amazon and everywhere else, start thinking about things that are really important, because a lot of that decoration is just fluff. And without a shadow of a doubt, the kids come in there and before you know it, it's a mess anyway, and they've destroyed half the stuff that you put in there. So let's not spend our money on decorating our classrooms, but rather on buying things perhaps if you have to. I prefer going to secondhand shops and op shops where you can get some really interesting old things that are going to get kids asking questions. And of course, your classroom should be attractive. You want kids to want to walk in and think, oh, this is a really nice space to learn in. But remember that overwhelm is also a big problem. You do not want to bring everything from home, including the kitchen sink, and stick that in your classroom, because kids are going to get overwhelmed by that. Keep things simple. Keep things easy. And you also want to think about your colors. We love all those pretty colors, but actually, it's natural colors that keep kids calm. Think about nature and try to replicate the colors of nature in your classroom. not primary colors. You want to think about, soft blues, think about the ocean, think about mountains, those soft greens, think about the earth, sort of soft beigey, browny colors. That's what you want in your classroom because those colors are calming. And that's what you want. You do not want kids bouncing off the walls. And also remember that more and more of our classes have now got neurodivergent kids. And a lot of stuff and a lot of bright colors all cause overwhelm. So think about what you can do to keep calm environment. Then I want to talk about the outdoor learning environment as well. And this was a big episode. It was episode 12 of the podcast. And you really need to go and listen to that one. Because our outdoor environment is just an extension of our indoor environment. It's not just a bare space. In one of my interviews last year, I interviewed Victoria Hackett, and she's the outdoor classroom expert. And you can go and listen to that episode too. I'll put a link in the show notes where you can learn and listen to how do we set up outdoor classrooms so that they too can spark curiosity in our children. It's not just about sending them outside. It's about how do we set up the outdoors. Just not with spending money, just using the things that you've got and using natural things, wood, sticks, stones, all these kinds of things, and how you actually think about going about setting up that outdoor space so that it can be an extension of the learning that you're doing indoors. So go and listen to episode 12 of the podcast after you finish listening to this one. And then the last one that I want to talk about is episode 39. And episode 39 is the ultimate back-to-school organization for teachers. This was all about the big picture stuff that's necessary. The things like you need your planning, your organization, your start of the year, how you're going to kick it off, where you're going to put the stuff, where are the kids going to put their backpacks, where are they going to put their drink bottles, where are they going to put their their diaries or the folders or whatever you might have in your classroom. You've got to think about that organization. How are they going to store their books? Is it going to be easy for them to get to it? Because remember, we've also got kids that struggle with executive function. You want to make it easy for these children. You want to make it easy so that they can get hold of their books and the necessary equipment to get on with a lesson. So think about your organization. It is super important. But then we also want to think about the provocations in our classroom. What are we going to stick in our classrooms that is going to cause children to ask questions and be interested in learning? And so again, as I've said earlier, go to op shops, go to secondhand shops, and go and see what you can get there that is related to what you are teaching. The things that you have set up, the provocations that you have set up in your room should link directly to your curriculum, to what you're teaching. So whatever you're doing this first term for science or your humanities, those are the kinds of provocations that you should be setting up in your classroom for this first term. And remember that in early childhood, you want little different rooms inside your classroom. You want an area where kids can play with blocks. You want an area where kids can go and explore scientific things, where they can experiment, where they can grow seeds, where they can observe animals. You want an area where there's perhaps still Lego or construction materials where they can go and build and construct with recycling materials, for example. You want an area where where they can go and be quiet and have a book corner and grab a book and read. Perhaps you want an area where you can actually sit with a small group of children when you're doing your guided reading practice, for example, when you're learning and teaching them about comprehension strategies. All these little areas in your room are really important in early childhood. And don't think that when a kid gets to year 2 or year 3, you now need to take away the Lego and the blocks. They're still only 7 and 8. They need those things to play with and to express themselves with. And not forgetting, of course, manipulatives. I've heard so many times where in a year 2 or a year 3 classroom, there aren't even counters for children to actually come to grips with real materials which can help them in their mathematical thinking. We still need manipulatives and hands-on materials even in older year groups, because you'll have kids in year 5 that still are trying to grapple with math concepts from year 2. So you need counters. You need materials that children can use where they can express their understanding in a concrete way with manipulatives. And of course, that's another way you can actually assess them as well, because you don't always need a worksheet for assessment purposes. So this little podcast episode today is a short and sweet one, and it's really just about encouraging you to think about why you're doing things before you rush off and go and buy a million things. Before you start setting up your classroom, just think about why. Why are you putting this thing into your classroom? Why are you choosing to put a block corner in this corner? And as long as you really understand and you know why you're doing things, then cool, go ahead and do them. But you really do have to be very intentional. You hear that word a lot in teaching, intentional, be intentional. But it is really true, as much of a cliche that it is. We do have to actually think before we do, and we have to understand why we're doing, so that if anybody comes in, admin comes in and asks you, well, how come that's there? Or how come that's there? You can actually explain your thinking behind that and why you're doing what you're doing. So that's all for this week. I just want to give you a heads up about next week's episode, and that's going to be with Daniel Barton from Educated by Nature here in Perth, Australia. He is all about taking learning outdoors. So if that's something that you're thinking of doing, next week's episode with Daniel Barton is the perfect episode to listen to. So don't forget. So you should really follow the show. Click that follow button so then you'll be notified every time a new episode is published. That way you won't miss out. And also, listen, if you enjoy listening to Blooming Curious, then could you please do me a favor? Click on those 3 buttons and share the episode with a friend. The only way this podcast grows and the only way we get more listeners is if you tell more people. Word of mouth works a treat. So click on those 3 buttons, share with a friend. And if you really like the podcast, please leave a review. That would really make my day. So until next week, when there's Daniel Barton on, talking about outdoor learning, I will love and leave you. And remember that curiosity is your superpower. So stay blooming curious. I'll see you next week.